Have you ever wondered what you would do if the love of your life disappeared, and years later you discovered that she was hiding a secret that would change everything? Lucas had everything: money, power, a luxurious life. But he gave up the only person who really mattered. Why was that? Because he was told that love without an heir wasn't enough, and he believed it. But fate doesn't accept mistakes without punishment. 10 years later, one afternoon, Lucas sees Marta again. Only now. She's not alone. 2 boys, identical to him. How is that possible? What has Marta been hiding all these years? And most importantly, is it too late to recover everything he's lost? This story will grip you from start to finish. Get ready to feel every emotion. The aroma of expensive wine mingled with the woody scent that wafted through the dining room. The sparkle of the chandeliers reflected off the meticulously laid table, but no exquisite detail could mask the coldness between the two. Marta fiddled absent-mindedly with her cutlery, trying to decipher Lucas's expression. He wouldn't look her in the eye. "You look strange." Her voice broke the heavy silence. He lifted his gaze, but still avoided looking at her for too long. He took a deep breath, squeezing the rim of his wineglass as if it would steady him. "We need to talk." Marta put her fork down on her plate. His tone made her stomach turn. She felt her heart racing, the chill down her spine that precedes something devastating. "What about?" Lucas sniffled and finally met her eyes. It was the last time he could look at Marta like that. The last time he could see the woman he loved without being contaminated by what he was about to do. "We both knew it would happen. I need to move on." The waiter appeared at the side of the table, asking if they wanted anything else. Neither of them answered. Marta blinked several times, trying to process the words that seemed too absurd to be real. "What?" Lucas straightened his shoulders and kept his voice steady. "It's over." Marta let out an incredulous laugh, but there was no humor in her gaze. "Lucas, if you love me, why are you doing this?" The pain in his chest intensified. He wanted to hold her, to tell her it was a mistake, that he would give anything to be with her. But he knew he couldn't. Love isn't enough. Marta felt the ground crumble beneath her feet. "Are you serious?" He nodded, keeping his expression cool. "We can find a way. Please, Lucas." Marta reached across the table, trying to touch him, but he pulled back. "We can't. You can't give me what I need." The words went through Marta like a sharp blade. "What do you need?" Lucas looked away. "My family has expectations, Marta. I have expectations. An heir." Her mouth fell open. "Are you breaking up with me because I can't have children?" His silence was the cruelest answer he could have received. Marta pushed back her chair and stood up. "You're a coward." Lucas swallowed. If he said anything else, he would break down right there. Then he remained silent, watching Marta pick up her bag and leave the restaurant. She walked aimlessly through the city, her face wet with tears. The night was cold, and the surrounding buildings seemed oppressive. The city lights twinkled, but nothing could calm the hurricane inside her. In her apartment, she packed a picture frame with a photo of the two of them and threw it in her suitcase. She grabbed some clothes and a handful of belongings and forced herself to breathe. She picked up a piece of paper and a pen. "I hope that one day you'll realize what you've lost." She folded the note and left it on the table. She couldn't stay there. At the mansion, Lucas entered his office and poured himself a glass of whiskey. His gaze landed on the phone. He could call, say he was sorry, that none of it made sense. But he didn't. He got up and walked to the window, looking out at the city below, so full of life. He felt like an empty shell. He took out his cell phone and opened the last photo they had taken together. Marta was smiling next to him, innocent of what was to come. For a moment, he thought there might still be time. But then, In the distance, the red lights of a cab moved away down the avenue, and with them, Marta disappeared from his life. Lucas tightened the knot of his tie as he crossed the busy sidewalk. The afternoon sun reflected off the city's mirrored buildings, but his mind was only focused on the meeting he had in a few minutes. He picked up his cell phone to check for messages when a childish giggle caught his attention. He glanced at his reflection and stopped. The square in front of him was full of people enjoying the weekend, but his gaze found only one person, Marta. She was sitting on a bench, smiling at two identical boys. Twins, the slightly messy brown hair, the sparkle in their eyes, their laughter. The air seemed to run out. The two boys ran around playing with each other. The smaller one tripped over a root, and Lucas, moved by an inexplicable instinct, stepped forward. The little boy fell forward, but before he hit the ground, Lucas grabbed him by the arm and stood him up. The boy blinked at him in surprise. "Wow, thanks, kid." Lucas could hardly breathe. The child was... He opened his mouth, but before he could say anything, the other boy came running and stopped abruptly. The two boys stared at each other. Then the second boy pointed directly at Lucas and said, "Hey, you look just like my brother." Lucas's heart pounded so hard that he felt his pulse flutter in his temples. Marta. He looked at her and found her paralyzed on the bench, holding a coffee cup that was shaking slightly in her hands. Lucas let go of the child, and the boys ran back to her. "Mom, this guy helped me," said one of them. Marta jumped to her feet. "Let's get out of here, now." She took both their hands and started walking quickly away, which only made Lucas's despair grow. "Marta!" he called out, his voice louder than he had intended. She stopped, but didn't look back. "We have nothing to talk about," she said, in a tone so low that only he could hear. Lucas frowned, feeling a knot forming in his stomach. "Marta, wait." She ignored him, pulling her children with her. But Lucas couldn't move. He just stood there frozen, watching the woman he had never gotten over disappear again into the crowd, now accompanied by two children who looked like a child version of himself. Inside the car, Marta gripped the steering wheel tightly. Her hands were shaking. The children chattered in the back seat, laughing at the coincidence. "Mom, that boy looked like us." She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. Not now. Not like this. Her chest rose and fell in irregular breaths. She knew it would happen one day, but she wasn't ready. The next morning, Lucas didn't sleep. He couldn't take his eyes off the twins. They were his. There was no doubt about it. His stomach churned just remembering their features, their gestures, the shape of their faces. Why hadn't Marta ever told him? He picked up his cell phone and typed her name into the search. His finger hesitated over the screen before pressing the call button. But she didn't call. Not yet. He needed to find out the truth. Lucas crossed his fingers on the table, his mind spinning at an absurd speed. The coffee was cooling in front of him, untouched. He needed to talk to Marta. If those boys were really her children, and he was absolutely sure they were, then why hadn't she ever told him? A wave of conflicting emotions hit him: shock, anger, regret. He stood up abruptly, reaching for his car keys. He wasn't going to waste any time. The cafe was small and discreet, situated in a quiet street. Lucas entered without hesitation. His eyes met Marta's immediately. She was sitting alone at a corner table, munching on a croissant absent-mindedly. He approached her before she could notice him. "You need to explain this to me." Marta froze. Her jaw clenched before she slowly looked up. "What are you doing here?" "Don't play games with me, Marta." He leaned over the table. "You know very well why I'm here." She let go of her fork. "I have nothing to tell you." "The twins. Are they my children?" Her silence was enough for anger to grow inside him. "Answer me." Marta leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms. "What if they are?" Lucas widened his eyes. "What do you mean, What if they are? That changes everything. Marta laughed, but it was a dry laugh. Does it? You made your choice 10 years ago, Lucas. And now, all of a sudden, you want to be Father of the Year? He slammed his hands on the table, leaning closer. You had no right to hide this from me. Her eyes sparkled, but not with emotion or anger. No? You had the right to abandon me at your family's whim. Now you want to argue about what's fair. Lucas ran a hand through his hair in frustration. This isn't about us. It's about them. Exactly. Marta stood up, picking up her bag. That's why I'm going to make sure they stay away from you. Lucas grabbed her wrist before she left. Don't push me away, Marta. She pulled her hand away. You're already away. And he left without looking back. On the way home, Marta felt her hands trembling on the steering wheel. Her heart was racing, and not just from anger. It was fear. She knew Lucas wasn't going to give up, and she didn't know if she was ready to. Lucas was back in his office, pacing back and forth. His lawyer was talking on the phone, but he was barely listening. They have my blood. I have rights. Do you want to go to court? The lawyer's voice sounded hesitant. Lucas rubbed his face. I just want to meet them. On the other end of the line, the lawyer sighed. Then maybe start by proving that you've changed. Lucas closed his eyes. Changed. Would that be enough? Lucas couldn't sleep that night. The image of the twins, so much like him, and Marta's expression full of resentment haunted his mind. He needed answers. The next morning he drove to one of the city's most charming neighborhoods. Marta's name appeared on a small glass plaque above the door of a workshop. He entered. The smell of freshly ironed fabric mingled with the aroma of coffee. Shelves displayed elegant dresses, delicately sewn by hand. A few customers were there, but Lucas didn't see Marta. An employee approached. Can I help you? He adjusted his tie. I'm looking for Marta. The employee watched him for a moment. Marta is busy right now. If you want to leave a message, I'll wait. He crossed his arms, looking around. Framed photos adorned the counter. Marta with the twins, the boys smiling, happy. Without him. 10 minutes later, Marta appeared through the back door. Her smile disappeared the moment she saw him. What are you doing here? We need to talk. She crossed her arms. We've talked enough. Lucas stepped forward. You owe me. Marta narrowed her eyes. I don't owe you anything. He pointed to one of the photos on the counter. Do you really think you can just erase my existence? Marta gripped the counter tightly. I didn't erase you, Lucas. You chose to leave. Lucas felt a lump in his throat. I made a mistake, but you never thought I should know. Marta let out a short laugh. You wanted to know? Did you want a family, Lucas, or just what your family expected of you? He blinked, surprised by the harshness of the words. Marta shook her head. Go away. Marta, now. Lucas hesitated, but faced with the silent fury in her eyes, he turned and left. But one thing was clear, he wasn't going to give up. In the late afternoon, Marta returned home exhausted. The children were playing in the living room, scattering crayons all over the floor. Mommy, I drew a superhero, said one of the boys. Marta smiled. And what's his name? The other boy raised his voice excitedly. Captain Mighty. He's strong and he looks like that strange boy from the square. Marta's smile disappeared. We don't talk to strangers, remember? The boys nodded and went back to their drawings. She sank onto the sofa, closing her eyes for a moment. Lucas had reappeared, and she knew he wasn't going away so easily. That night, Lucas opened a bottle of whiskey but didn't drink. He just watched the amber liquid as his heart heaved in his chest. Marta was right. He had made the worst decision of his life. But this time, he would do it differently. Lucas spent the next few days trying to decide his next move. Marta was determined to push him away, but he knew he couldn't accept that. He had to find a way to get closer, not just to her, but to his children. So when he heard that Marta took the children to the playground every Saturday morning, he saw his opportunity. That Saturday, he put on casual clothes, something less imposing than his usual suits, and headed for the park. The park was full of children playing, parents chatting, and couples enjoying the sunny day. Then he saw her. Marta was sitting on a bench, holding an open book in her lap, but her attention was on the boys running across the grass. Taking a deep breath, Lucas approached her. "Don't look at me like that, I just want to talk." Marta stopped. "Again, I'm not leaving." She closed the book with a heavy sigh. "Lucas, this is becoming stalking." "Marta, please." She stared at him for a few seconds, then looked at her children playing. 5 minutes. Lucas sat down next to her. "I need to meet them." Marta laughed, but without humor. "It's not that simple. Marta, they have a right to know who I am." She looked at him, and for the first time, Lucas saw something different in her gaze. "Do you think you can just show up and say, 'Hi, I'm your dad, let's play ball'?" "If necessary, yes." She snorted, crossing her arms. "They don't know about you, Lucas. I've never mentioned your name." Lucas blinked. "You never mentioned me." "Never." He felt a tightness in his chest. "Why?" She sighed. "Because I wanted to protect them." Lucas was silent for a moment, then looked at the boys. "Let me try." Marta watched her children for a few seconds before turning to him. "I don't know if I can trust you." He held her gaze. "Give me a chance to prove that you can." She sighed. "If I accept this, it will be at my pace. I'll accept anything, as long as I get the chance." Marta's eyes were still full of doubt, but for the first time there wasn't just anger there. "I'll think about it." Lucas nodded. "That's a start." The next day, Marta was sitting on the sofa while her children played on the floor. "Mum, why don't we have a father?" Her heart raced. She swallowed. "Some families are different, my love. But that strange boy, he looked like me." Marta closed her eyes for a second. "You don't have to worry about that." The boys shrugged and went back to playing. Marta, however, knew that the matter was far from over. And worse, she knew that maybe Lucas was right. Lucas drove through the city, lost in thought. For the first time, Marta seemed willing to give in, and now he needed to prove that he wouldn't let her down again. Lucas never thought waiting could be so difficult. Marta had said she needed time, but the days dragged on in agonizing silence. He looked at his cell phone often, hoping for a message, a sign that she was willing to give in. But nothing. Until a week later, a notification appeared on the screen. "Marta, we can talk." He felt his heart race. "Lucas, when and where?" The answer came almost immediately. "Marta, in the park, tomorrow at 4 p.m., just you and me." Lucas held the phone tightly. This was progress, small but real. The next day, he arrived at the park ahead of schedule. Marta showed up on time, wearing a light dress and sunglasses. "Thank you for coming." He arched an eyebrow. "I thought I was the only one insisting on it." Marta sighed. "I talked to the boys." Lucas froze. "What did you say?" "That they have a father, and that he wants to meet them." His chest filled with something between relief and nervousness. "And how did they react?" "Curious, confused." Lucas nodded. "That's normal." Marta crossed her arms. "I don't know if I'm doing the right thing, Lucas." He took a step forward. "You are." She looked at him skeptically. "You can't just go back and pretend nothing happened." Lucas sighed. "I'm not pretending. I'm trying to make amends." Marta looked away. "I just want them to be okay. Then let me be part of it." She was silent for a few seconds. "I still don't trust you." Lucas nodded. "Then let me prove that you can." Marta closed her eyes for a moment. "They want to get to know you, but slowly." He smiled slightly. "That's a start." That evening, Marta watched her children playing in the living room. Children, remember we talked about Daddy? The two boys stopped and looked at her. Yes, he wants to see you. The twins looked at each other. Can we meet him? Marta took a deep breath. Yes, but take your time, okay? The boys nodded excitedly. What's he like? Marta smiled sideways. Well, I guess you'll find out soon enough. Lucas didn't sleep that night. He was about to meet his children, and this time he wasn't going to leave them behind. Lucas felt his heart pounding in his chest. He was sitting on a bench in the square, watching the children run and play around the swings. It was there that he would finally meet his children. Marta was next to him, keeping a safe distance. They're excited, she said without looking at him directly. So am I, Lucas admitted. Marta took a deep breath, as if she was about to make a difficult decision. I want to make one thing clear before we start. Lucas nodded. Say it. She turned to him, serious. If you hurt these boys, if you promise them something you can't keep, if you disappear from their lives like you did from mine, I swear you'll never come near them again. He stared at her, absorbing every word. I'm not going to disappear, Marta. She studied his face for a few seconds before finally waving to the boys who were standing a little further away. Children, come over here. The two boys ran over to them. Lucas felt a lump in his throat when he saw them up close. Hi, kids. They looked at him curiously. Are you our father? One of them asked. Lucas smiled a little nervously. Yes, I am. The other tilted his head. You look like me. Lucas laughed. I think we do look alike. Marta watched the scene attentively. The boys seemed curious but not scared. What do you like to do? Lucas asked, trying to relax. Play heroes, one of them exclaimed. And draw, the other added. Lucas smiled. Do you like superheroes? The boys nodded excitedly. Do you like them too? One of them asked. Lucas hesitated. Well, I don't know much about it, to tell you the truth. The two looked at each other before one of them said, Then we'll teach you. Marta let out a low laugh. Lucas felt a strange warmth in his chest. I'd love to learn. Time passed quickly. Lucas played with the boys, chased them around the park, and listened attentively as they explained their favorite heroes. He never imagined he could feel so comfortable. Marta watched from afar. There was something about Lucas that seemed different, but she was still afraid to believe it. As the sun began to set, Marta called the boys. Time to go home. The two complained a little, but obeyed. Lucas approached. Can I see you again? The boys looked at each other and smiled. Yes. Marta looked at Lucas. Let's see. It was a cautious answer, but for Lucas it was progress. He watched the three of them walk away, feeling something he hadn't felt for a long time, hope. Lucas never thought that a few hours in a park could change the way he saw life so much. He had spent years building an empire, closing million-dollar deals, and surrounded by people who only saw him as an influential name. But there, between conversations about superheroes and spontaneous laughter, he felt something that no amount of money could buy. That night, Lucas didn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling of the luxurious apartment where he lived, feeling the silence of the place echo more than ever. For the first time, he realized that he had everything, and at the same time, he had nothing. The next day, he picked up his phone and sent a message to Marta. Lucas, can I see you again? Time seemed to drag on as he waited for a reply. Minutes passed. Then finally, his cell phone vibrated. Marta, not today, but maybe at the weekend. He closed his eyes and smiled slightly. Maybe. That was already more than he could have imagined weeks ago. The weekend came faster than Lucas had expected. This time, Marta invited him to meet them at a cafe she used to frequent with the boys. The place was small and cozy, with rustic wooden tables and a display case full of homemade sweets. When she entered, she saw the twins sitting next to Marta, leafing through a children's menu full of colourful illustrations. Marta's eyes met his, and Lucas noticed that despite maintaining her firm posture, she seemed less resistant. "You came," she said, as Lucas pulled out a chair to sit down. "I told you I wouldn't disappear." The boys looked at him, excited. "Hi, Dad!" The word took Lucas by surprise. He blinked a few times, absorbing the impact. Marta tensed up, ready to intervene if necessary. Lucas smiled. "Hi, champions." They both laughed, turning their attention back to the menu. Marta relaxed a little. "They're getting used to the idea." Lucas watched her for a moment. "What about you?" She looked down at the coffee in her cup. "I'm still deciding." The answer was honest. Lucas appreciated that. The coffee was lighter than Marta had expected. Lucas talked naturally with the boys, without forcing anything. He listened carefully to their every word, laughed at their stories, and asked questions about their drawings and games. And, to his surprise, the twins seemed to like him. When the meeting was over, Lucas accompanied Marta and the boys to the car. "That was fun," one of the twins said, holding his mother's hand. "Can we see you again?" the other asked. Lucas looked at Marta, waiting for her approval. She sighed and nodded. "We can arrange something for next weekend." Lucas smiled. "I'll look forward to it." The boys nodded and got into the car. Marta gave Lucas one last look before getting in too. "Good night, Lucas." "Good night, Marta." He stood there watching the car disappear down the street. He had taken one step, and now there was no turning back. Lucas never imagined that, in such a short space of time, his life would change so drastically. He had spent years believing that his decisions were final, that his fate was set with no room for revision. But now, sitting in Marta's living room, watching his children play with colourful cars, he realized that he had been wrong. Marta entered the room with 2 cups of coffee. "Do you still prefer it without sugar?" she asked, handing him the cup. Lucas smiled slightly. "You remember?" She sat down on the sofa opposite, watching the boys. "They're happy," she said, more to herself than to him. "And you?" Lucas asked. Marta turned to him hesitantly. "I'm scared." Lucas waited for her to continue. "You showed up after 10 years, Lucas. You changed everything. I've spent a long time building a life without you. I don't know if I can trust you to stay this time." He put his cup on the table and held her gaze. "I can't erase the past, but I can prove to you that the future can be different." Marta sighed. "How?" "By being the father they deserve. By being the man you need." She lowered her eyes to the cup of coffee between her fingers. "Are you sure about this?" Lucas reached out, lightly touching her hand. "For the first time in my life, yes." The boys ran up to them, interrupting the moment. "Mum, can we play outside?" Marta nodded. "Sure, but stay where I can see you." The twins left excitedly. Lucas remained silent, watching Marta. "Do you think you can forgive me one day?" Marta took a deep breath. "I don't know, but maybe I can try." Lucas smiled. "That's enough for me." Marta looked at him for a moment, before smiling too. Sometimes fate gives us a second chance, but it's up to us to have the courage to accept it.